Welcome to FinTech Chatter News, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in FinTech executive search. Follow us on your favorite podcast player or FinTech Chatter TV on YouTube.
Welcome to your weekly roundup of all things fintech. I'm Dexter Cousins.
And I'm Joanne Cousins, and this week we have three special guests.
Later in the show, I'll be chatting with Steve Vallas, ex-CEO of Blockchain Australia, about his latest venture.
And Toby Norton-Smith from X15 Ventures joins us to talk about their latest Xccelerate program.
On last week's show, we gave a brief mention to MayBuy, a new product launch from our friends at Up. It's been a massive hit, not only with customers, but it even appeared on national TV. So making his FinTech Chatter debut is Anson Parker, Chief Product Officer of Up, to tell us more. Anson, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dexter. Thanks for having me.
I can't believe it's taken me this long to get you on.
Well, here I am.
Yeah, look, worth waiting for. Well, as I mentioned there in the intro, we gave a shout out to MayBuy last week. I think it was on Tuesday's show, and I wasn't expecting a reaction you guys got. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happened this last week?
Yeah, we launched MayBuy. It's a feature that first, I guess, was conceived about a year ago when we were looking at, this crazy rocket ship buy now, pay later industry. I think, Afterpay maybe had just been bought or wasn't far off that. It seemed like every second week a bank or financial institution of some kind was coming out with a sort of a buy now, pay later solution. And we'd been thinking about what's Up's kind of take on this space. How would we launch a product in this space that still held sort of financial well-being at its core and was really designed to, give people a way to work towards these material aspirations, but in sort of a safe way, in a safe space, free from maybe some of the things that can cause challenges in that sort of easy credit buy now pay later type of space. And so it sort of started with that idea, and we developed some concepts, and the excitement built within the team, I think. At its core, it's effectively a savings program. But I think that to see it only as that is to kind of miss the point about what it is. And, I guess back to the original question, I guess we developed that stuff into the feature that launched last week. And we also saw a great opportunity to really make that the secret feature that had been long anticipated, and kind of use that as a bit of a teaser campaign. But also to really, help sort of spread the word and create the impact. We really wanted to do some sort of real life activation to kind of tell the story, because if I do say so, as sort of head of product at Up, we develop a whole bunch of great features that don't always get the media coverage that we think that they deserve. And so that's kind of, I think, something a bit different that we did with this one.
So can you tell us about what you did differently? Because again, this is another, kind of just I guess it's my experience of dealing with you guys for the last 4 years, I would just say it's classic Up, right? Like not expected, but super cool. So what was the, what was the kind of way that you got this out to market? Because it's pretty cool what you did.
Yeah, so we basically opened a pop-up store called the MayBuy Exchange. And it's a place where outsiders could come in and bring in something they'd bought generally online, we found, that they regretted. So a sort of regretful purchase that perhaps if they'd had a tool like MayBuy, they may not have made, and really give them the opportunity to get some cash back for that purchase, which was a bit of fun. It wasn't we didn't open a sort of like cash converters style operation. It was customers could bring in an item, they could swap it out from some up merch if they wanted to. Up merch is something that there's always strong demand for, or they could sort of spin the wheel and tap their up card and sort of get a random amount of cash back for that item. And, that included some pretty tasty prizes. And including, I think, like a few $500 prizes and things like that. But it was sort of a random amount. And then those items we will donate those. So, we created this really fun store. I mean, the thing being a digital proposition, you don't really get the opportunity to do stuff out in the real world very often. And be able to do that and create a space and a space that we can talk to outsiders and meet them is a lot of fun. So we have the locations was on the main street of Melbourne, Swanston Street, and you could definitely see the people taking taking notice as they walked past.
Mm. What was the strangest thing that people came in to swap?
There were a few. I think my favorite was a plush croissant looking pillow with legs. It was kind of like I have no idea why they bought it or what for, but it was very interesting.
Paying for, eh?
Yeah.
No, you kind of touched on this earlier. I've said this a lot. This time last year, I think pretty much every business that approached us to help them hire was a buy now, pay later of some sort. And it was like really bizarre stuff like, school lunches and crypto and, even recruitment fees. And I think the kind of thing that really struck me with the approach that you guys have taken, and you touched on this earlier, is like the simplicity of it. What do you think it is that, is this like a massive pushback or kickback, do you think, to buy now, pay later? Or do you think it's just the fact that you've got such a strong kind of customer base who pretty much whatever it is that you do, they love?
Well, I think that this does kind of touch on a nerve with with what's happening in the buy now, pay later space. But, we don't see, it's interesting because a lot of the headlines or articles might call MayBuy sort of a buy now, pay later killer or something of that nature. We really see it as an alternative, and there's sort of a place, for both potentially in people's lives, obviously with MayBuy, it is more like just saving for something. I think the difference is that you have that integrate. I mean, I think that it's almost overlooked. What we've built is sort of an integration, right, between retail and a bank and a banking app. I don't know of any banking apps that have that. So from a product page, from an online store, you can literally share a product into your banking app, and we'll pull in that image, that name, the price, and set up an automated savings plan. So that kind of living in consumers' world, I think is quite a different thing that MayBuy sort of explores. And I think that's sort of different to where some of the messaging that banks may have put out earlier, which was, financial advisors, which is like, just save for this stuff. Just go open a savings account and set it all up. And it's sort of putting it all back on the person to kind of do all this work when the alternatives are so much easier. And I think that's something we dialed into, is that a lot of what these sort of at checkout credit services do is actually lower the friction of that experience, right? It makes it easier and faster. It's not just the alternate sort of payment setup. So we really wanted to still celebrate that sort of pleasure of the purchase and that kind of retail therapy moment of, hey, I'm sort of getting this thing and it feels good, and it sort of triggers some dopamine receptor or something in my brain, and celebrate that still, but with this idea that when that fades, you've still got an opportunity to decide whether you still want it, and to weigh up, when you finish saving, that those accumulated savings versus that item. Like I think that can be a different comparison when you've worked hard to save that money versus the future you that's going to pay something off.
Yeah. I remember when you launched the pull up in the app to save $1, and I was there like I was on a pokey machine, just so much. So it is kind of addictive, the stuff that you guys put out, but in a very good way.
There's something we always try to do is not take on the kind of stern lecturing persona, and you should do this because it's right. If we can make doing the right thing fun, then that's what we aim to do.
Now, we get some seriously talented people listening to this show, Anson. They're interested in joining up and being part of what is, without doubt, I think the most unique digital bank in the world. Right, and I don't say that lightly. Where can people get in touch?
Yeah, well, firstly, they should download the Up app from the App Store and sign up, because there's nothing that helps a job interview better than if you can profess to being an upsider. But at our website, up.com.au, we have a careers page. So we post information there about roles we're currently hiring, or even if you're just interested in working on Up in the future and your role's not listed, then we still encourage you to get in touch and say hi.
Awesome. Well, look, congrats to everybody. I mean, just another, kind of super positive experience with Up, and just, another example of where you guys are really, really differentiating yourselves.
Thanks, mate.
Raise has given its users a big pat on the back this week with news that their recurring investments figure has hit $1 billion.
And more good news on capital raises. Our friends at Change Financial have announced a $5.7 million investment round. The announcement comes off the back of deals with 4 New Zealand financial institutions worth $15.2 million over 5 years. The injection of capital will support future growth for the company.
Cover Genius continues to expand its reach, this time partnering with Zipco to launch a protection feature for its customers. This simple embedded process will provide Zip customers the chance to add purchase protection at checkout.
Last week, X15 Ventures announced their latest Xccelerate program, and I'm joined by Toby Norton-Smith to tell us more. Toby, great to have you back on FinTech Chatter.
Hey, Dexter, it's a pleasure to join you.
Well, we've got some good news to share, and this is the FinTech News Show. But before we talk about that, could you tell our listeners a little bit more about X15 Ventures and what you do?
I could talk underwater about X15 Ventures, Dex, but I'll keep it brief. So we're the venture scaling arm of Commonwealth Bank. We've got a very broad mandate, probably implied by the name Venture Scaler. We build, we buy, and we invest in ventures that we think can, ultimately benefit CBA customers. But really what that means that we offer to ventures is an opportunity to plug them in to the assets of CBA Group at X15. And so, what we focus on and where we think we add quite unique value in X15 is looking for those, really repeatable, really scalable points of leverage that an external venture could potentially get by partnering with a, big enterprise like CBA. And so, 2 obvious points of leverage are technology, so building out connections between a venture and CBA Group, and policy, finding ways to make sure ventures, which, notoriously it is a difficult path to partner with large enterprises. And so we look for ways to make that easier. So that's X15. We've got, we launched in February 2020. We've got 9 ventures in our portfolio. The majority of those we have built, and that was by design. When we kicked off, we knew our model was a bit different in terms of such a sort of focus on integration back with an enterprise. So we sort of wanted to prove the pipes a little bit by, our first ventures, they could be the guinea pigs, and we thought that was only fair that we built those. More recently, we've been more active with acquisitions and investments as well.
Fantastic. Now, there was some news last week where you announced your new accelerator program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, a slight correction. Well, or we don't actually think of it as a traditional accelerator with an A. Probably the branding's a bit confusing. The program is called Xccelerate with an X. So that's our slightly uncreative way of bringing the X15 brand into it. But what it really is it's a short, light touch, sharp program that gives founders, really deep insights into what it could be like to partner, distribute, take investment from a large corporate like a bank. So we call it Xccelerate because it's really an accelerated or expedited, investment program for early stage founders where, what's unique to our program and what we really focus on is bottoming out whether, a venture might have a suitable pathway to scale via enterprise partnership. That's what we think we have expertise in. That's what we've done with our 9 ventures to date. And we've got some great sort of proof points around the benefits that can bring, but it's not for every venture. And there are, as I think I alluded to before, there are, very well understood challenges of partnering with large corporates. And so partly that's why this program is here, for ventures to test that out, give it a run. It goes for over a month. The time commitment is 2 or 3 days. And, in those 2 or 3 days, ventures will, not only meet, we think a really great collection of external experts who can advise them on partnering with corporates, but also meet some of the domain experts from within CBA who can sort of help them understand where they're at on that sort of maturity model to partner with a corporate.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you've run these programs before and you always have a theme with the programs. What's the theme on this one?
Yeah, that's right. So this is I think the 4th time we've done it. Absolutely thrilled to say sort of default mode for this one will be physical in person at our, really awesome offices out at Everleigh in Sydney. So one theme is, post-COVID or, at least get back into the office is going to be exciting. But the theme is on payments. So it's shaping the future of Australian payments, which, I understand from our perspective, is a very, very broad theme. We don't just want applicants who think of themselves as payments companies to apply. We're interested in anyone who is adding value, in payments or in adjacencies to payments. And, it's such a dynamic space at the moment. There's so much innovation rolling out both, in small ventures, but across the payments industry in Australia at the moment. I think about sort of, the pay to mandates that are rolling out, allowing, merchants and businesses to initiate real-time payments really quickly. Think about the innovations of account-to-account transactions, in crypto. There's just so much going on in this space at the moment. We really want to meet any business that is, thinks they're adding value in one of those areas.
Cool. What is the kind of ideal profile look like for the types of businesses that you invite onto the program?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're preference focus on sort of pre-Series A ventures, but we do want them to be more than an idea. Preferably they've already raised a little bit of capital from friends and family or at a seed stage. Certainly we want them to be able to demonstrate what they've built and how it's working, preferably with customers and revenue. So, otherwise, in terms of the profile of the business or the profiles of the founders, we want them to be open to exploring, enterprise or corporate partnership as one way in which they may scale their business. They don't need to be decided on that. As I alluded to, that's what the program's for. But people who are willing to engage in that and explore that, we think will get a lot of value out of the program.
Awesome. You and I have had this discussion a lot over the years, Toby, the kind of innovation theatre and, the disconnect that used to exist, I think, in the fintech industry here in Oz between the incumbents and the kind of startup community. What's been the approach now for the programs and what kind of successes have you had to ensure that anybody who's, kind of making the commitment to come on board gets some real value from it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, maybe I can speak to outcomes is the best way to do that. We've had 3 past winners, obviously, of the 3 prior programs we've run. Givable, a fantastic sort of, procurement ESG business. Splash Up, an e-commerce sort of checkout optimization business, and own home, most recently a rent to buy business. I mean, I don't mean to make light of it. One of the things that I'm proud of, though, is all three of those businesses are growing and are thriving, which, particularly in the current environment over a 3-year period, we're pleased about that. I think if I double click on own home, it's a good example of what our program seeks to prove out, in that was a very early stage venture when they received, won the Xccelerate program. Subsequent to that, as listeners have been familiar with, our own home have gone on a real tear in terms of both, attracting customers, building out their product, but ultimately in raising a lot of external capital. And we see, huge prospects. Obviously, it's a space that's very interesting to CBA Group, which is why, we think there's good opportunity, at a future date to sort of partner with them.
Yeah, it's brilliant to hear, Toby. As I said, we've had some real kind of honest discussions in the past about this, and it's fantastic to see that how much, the model has evolved in that it is now able to really support that kind of early stage startup community. What's the best way for people to get in touch and apply?
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward, Dex. Just hit the X15 Ventures website. We've got a page up on Xccelerate 22, so there's a lot of information there. Well, or hit me or any team member up on LinkedIn if you've got some questions before you apply. Very, very happy to have the chat. I mean, I think to your point that you made, X15 or Xccelerate, it won't be for everyone. But one thing I can be really clear about is we will be really candid. We'll be, hopefully quite direct about, as we've touched on numerous times in this conversation, about the challenges and the opportunity of when you can get enterprise or corporate partnership right. So it won't work for every venture, but that's what the program's for. That's more broadly what X15 is for, a way to help ventures plug in to the tremendous opportunity there. So, look forward to having a chat with anyone who's thinking about it. The clock is ticking. I think applications close at the end of the month, end of August, and then we kick off the program in September.
Cool. And that's x15ventures.com.au, is that right?
That's right.
Awesome. Now, we also had Kit on the show, I think, a few weeks back. And one of the kind of cool discussions that we had with Yish was really around, I guess, careers at X15. We get a lot of great talent listening to this show. Not everybody wants to be a startup founder, but a place like X15 Ventures, I think, is a perfect place to go if you want to go and test yourself in that environment before becoming a founder yourself. What's are you looking to hire people? And if you are, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
We absolutely are, Dexter, right across our portfolio of ventures that are scaling and inside X15 Core, the central team in X15. There's a lot of open roles. Starting point, our website, again, x15ventures.com.au, we've got all of the roles up there on the page. Again, though, if people want to hit me or one of my team up on LinkedIn more broadly or have a chat, very, very happy to do so. Maybe to put some color on we're after a very broad profile of people, right through from that sort of very hungry serial entrepreneur. I'd point to one of our ventures that's now out in market, Unloan, our digital mortgage business. Now that's run by someone, Daniel Oatley. This is his third venture. He's twice exited beforehand in the prop tech space, and he's come in with, very clear sort of full stack entrepreneurial capability, but was very clear from day one that X15 was the model he was after, where he could plug into and leverage assets of CommBank to make Unloan successful. So that's one profile. We are open to entrepreneurs who have, I would say at least, the maturity or open-mindedness to understand that in some contexts, partnering with corporate, should not be a slight, it should not be perceived as a weakness, but as a great opportunity, and recognize the business models that can really benefit from that. Then at the other end of the scale, we've got, lots of professional roles inside X15 Core. Bear in mind, unlike a normal venture capital business or a CVC, we've got a lot more roles than just investment. The predominant team members inside X15 Core are focused on providing services to ventures. So be that cybersecurity, risk and governance advisory, helping with the technology integrations back into CVA. So that again, probably any role type that you could think of, is open inside X15 Core. And I think as you touched on, it's a really nice middle ground, I think, for talent to explore between sort of corporate, and full-throated, full-risk startup inside X15 Core. So we'd love to hear from great people.
Awesome. Well,
as well as from you, Dex.
Yeah, it's been great to catch up again with you, Toby, and good luck with the new program. And it's great to hear about X15 and that model really starting to get some traction now, and the kind of risks that you took a couple of years back starting to really pay off.
Thank you, Dexter. It's always happy to chat. And look, we've got a lot more to prove ahead of us, but I think some of the ventures in our portfolio are really starting to scale up now, and some of that scale is coming through exactly what we've delivered. So we're not there yet, but really proud of where we're at so far.
Iris have announced that Marcus Price will take over the CEO MD role when Andrew Walsh retires in October. The ASX chess project has been delayed again, with more development required as the reason for the delay. The revised go-live date is now late 2024. Fintech Australia are again partnering with EY to conduct their yearly fintech census. The information from this will highlight issues the fintech community is facing. The feedback from this census will be the basis for this year's talking points with government, policymakers and key stakeholders. To take part, go to fintechaustralia.org.au.
I'm joined now by Steve Vallas, who was the previous CEO of Blockchain Australia, and I was expecting to have a bit of a break. But yesterday, he came up with a big announcement of his next thing. Steve, welcome to the show.
Come on, Dexter. You didn't actually expect me to take a break, did you?
I did expect you to take a break. I think your wife did as well, didn't she?
I think the prospect of quality time together, when it dawned upon her that would mean a lot of hours every single day, I think she was happy to let me just pursue the usual sort of obsessions.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think this is going to be a bit of a scoop for the FinTech News show that you're going to share with everybody your next move, which is Blockchain APAC. Can you tell us a little bit more about your plans and what you're about to launch?
Sure. I described it to someone the other day as business as unusual, which is the LinkedIn post I put up yesterday. Dexter, these conversations for me started 6 years ago. So when someone said to me, what do you do now in between roles? I said the role I gave up was the in-between bit. This is back to what I was ultimately doing. And ultimately, it's just me having lots of conversations, surfacing those conversations, and prioritizing, in many respects, my own views of what are the most important things that are happening in this space. Some of them are particularly unsexy in terms of what they are as far as headline grabbing. But what they do have is a common thread, which is a maturation story, the fact that the ecosystem is moving forward. Some of it's happening locally, but part of the focus on the APAC side is we are regionally connected in a way that people fail to appreciate when it comes to this technology, and globally being impacted as well. So hence the broader view, the more outward-looking conversation that is Blockchain APAC.
Fantastic. Now, I feel like you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice by just saying these are conversations. And, looking back at this last 2 years in Blockchain Australia, an incredible legacy. And I think, from my perspective, looking at what you've achieved has been bringing real, not just legitimacy to the industry here in Australia, but you've really driven it forward kind of considerably to where it was 2 years back. When you kind of look at the opportunities that are now here, for the industry, not just here in Australia and APAC, what are some of the things that have got you excited?
The reality here is the last 6 months and 9 months, the language that I've heard largely behind closed doors, Dexter, is that we are relevant.
Yeah.
It's a little thing, but it's an enormous thing, because for the longest time, we were just too far away from the rest of the world to matter. Notwithstanding the fact that we're sort of zoomed in locally, and you do get a sense there's a lot going on, there is, but are other people paying attention to it? The thing that transformed in the last 6 to 9 months is people were paying attention, reflected in my recent visit to the US and the way people asked about things that they were aware of that were happening in Australia. And similarly in the APAC region, other countries that are trying to model some of these conversations or saying it looks like there is more activity there or there's a greater openness in relation to this, that signalling locally, regionally and internationally is something I've taken a lot of comfort and pride in.
Fantastic. Now, your trip to the US, I'd like to talk about that a little bit more because there was some kind of significant meetings that you had there as well, a trip into Washington as well. What was the kind of sense that you got as to the US? Because we see in the news the whole time about the SEC and the challenges that seem to be there. Where do you think it's potentially going to land up in the US?
Well, it was a trip in 3 parts. In many respects, the experiences were different and very interesting, but they were reflective of a country that is clearly by some measure bigger and trying to build these things out in a way that we're not doing locally. Consensus, which was in Austin, Texas, people were talking about building stuff, Dexter. I mean, people didn't talk about prices. This focus that is constantly the clickbait that is prices go up, prices go down. Across 15,000, I think, participants in that event, people talked about building things. So that's what Austin felt like. Austin felt like a city where people were building. Went to Washington, really important meeting there, surprised me in some respects, met with the Federal Reserve. So, the big kahuna when it comes to printing money in this world, sat in a room with 4 people who were very interested in what was happening in Australia and was shocked to know that there were 10 more online. We had 14 people from the Federal Reserve who committed some time to talk about what was happening in Australia. That for me was a light bulb moment. Yeah. It said people think it's worth their time. And then when I went to New York and much of the conversation was around NFT, NYC and NFTs in general, I saw a generational element. I saw people in their 20s who believe in Web3, who believe in what this technology does, who believe in the prospect that they can make a difference. Those 3 elements for me were a very good sign of what the ecosystem as a whole is.
Yeah. How one of the things that I kind of really struggle with, is to try and get my head around everything. And I've kind of taken the decision that, look, I'm just going to focus on DeFi because it's so broad. And I mean, there's, everything is interlinked, but it just feels like it's just, there's way too much to try and get your head around. How have you got your head around all of, what's going on across Web3, across DeFi, blockchain itself, it's still a fundamental, the kind of building blocks for commerce?
The simple answer is continuity of interest in the space. The fact that I've been paying attention for a long time, it's a little bit like muscle memory, Dexter. Sometimes you have the advantage when you go back to the gym, you get bigger faster because you've been there before. So for me, it's just not losing that cadence. So that's one of the tricks. One of the other things was, and has been consistently, there's a certain level of domain experience you can achieve within segments of this space. You've got to make a decision at some point in time whether you drill deeper or whether you go wider. And that's an exercise for me in seeing the way the ecosystem is playing out and the willingness to say, I don't know everything. I know a significant proportion. The difference between those 2 things would be doubling the amount of time, and I make a conscious decision to say, no, I know enough to carry myself forward, so I'll just continue to build out skill sets. So wide and deep are the very 2 different decisions you need to make in this space. And once you get that sort of balance right, ultimately it's just how much time you can give to understanding the space.
So on that subject of time, you I'm assuming do have a lot more time on your hands now. Really demanding job, being any CEO of a kind of member-based body. Lots of demands from members, pulled in lots of different directions. How are you kind of now viewing this next period? And who are the types of clients and kind of businesses that you think you're going to be best set to help with blockchain APAC?
So 2 separate conversations there, Dexter. Blockchain APAC for me is not a consulting business. Blockchain APAC for me is a business that is conversations, connections, themes, and value into the broader ecosystem. So it's not for sale in that sense. The consulting bit will come separate kind of conversation for me and delivering that value into businesses. But the first part for me is where the value ultimately lies, just going in and saying, who are the best people in this space or who are the best versed in this space? Are they willing to be surfaced? What's that conversation kind of look like? Effectively act as a bit of a wayfinder for people when it comes to these topics. So that's one thing. It sounds odd, Dexter. I love the space. Like it is stimulating and challenging to get your head across this subject matter. So the time that I'm not spending in a stakeholder management sense to satisfy the requirements of members and other stakeholders in the space, I'm now shifting back to research, learning, and understanding the way these things thread together. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. I've met so many great people. Now the value I add back into these conversations is I have a broader sense of this space than they do more often than not, because I can take the time to walk aimlessly, as I tend to do on most days and weekends, and just consume information and be able to discard the things that I don't think are that relevant to the conversations I'm having, but effectively just to bolt that on into the next conversation I have, and then sort of pay it forward effectively.
Awesome. Now, I mentioned this before, an incredible 2-year tenure with Blockchain Australia, Steve, and I think unanimously across, the whole of the Aussie ecosystem, and I'm sure globally as well, everybody just, I think, full of praise and admiration for what you've done. But when you look back at the last 2 years, what would you say is your kind of proudest moment?
Dexter, I think I took a lot of pride for being able to represent people's views of this ecosystem, in my mind, well. What people never accused me of doing, largely never accused me of doing, was focusing on one thing or trying to get an outcome for a particular product or a particular person or a particular theme. I think I gave a good landscape view. And at various points in time, I think I was accused of being a maxi, and at the other end of the spectrum, I was a government sympathiser. So I sort of figured if I was accused of being both of those things or neither of those things, it would suggest that I was able to relatively even-handedly put views forward. And the aim for me was not trying to convince people about these things. All I've been trying to do for 2 years is saying, here is some data about this thing. If it's of interest to you, carry that forward. If it isn't, don't. But all I can do is present the information as best I've been able to accumulate it. And I think in that regard, it meant that I had to carry with me a lot of people's reputations, and I was happy at the conclusion of that period of time. The general assessment was that I carried their reputations forward for them with appropriate regard. So that's actually a lot of satisfaction from my perspective.
Awesome. Well, Steve, look, it's great to have you on, and I'm really glad we've got this opportunity just to I just wanted to give you a little bit of honor, really, because I've just, truly admired the job that you've done this last 2 years, where you've taken the industry and how you continue to be, kind of Mr. Blockchain for Australia. It's awesome. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they're keen to chat?
Twitter is always great. Steve Vallas at Twitter. So that's me all the time. Blockchain_APAC is the Twitter handle that I've shifted this dense subject matter to. LinkedIn, all the social channels, Dexter, that I'm always reading this stuff. And when you see it popping out, it's things that I think are important and people that I think are adding value. So that's what you find on those social channels.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
Thanks, Dexter.
Well, thanks for tuning in, and let us know what you think by leaving a review on Apple or giving us a 5-star review on the Spotify app.
If you have any news or feedback you want to share, email me, Joanne, at tier1people.com. Till the next episode, stay safe.